Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the UCAR Africa Initiative Seminar Series. Before we start, I'd like to briefly update the recent activities of this effort. So this initiative was funded by the UCAR President's Strategic Initiative Fund, and the project was launched in March this year. And the goal is to build a UCAR-wide initiative to coordinate UCAR's research and activities in order to accelerate environmental sustainability solutions for Africa. And this effort will be conducted by UCAR scientists and in collaboration with U.S. university partners and African-based researchers and the international community. Until today, we have 117 participants, mainly from UCAR and NCAR, but also from around 20 external institutions. We now have a website and a mail list, and we are dividing participants to different groups to facilitate small group discussions. Currently, we divided 5 groups based on research area, and those are air quality and health, climate, land and water, weather, education, training, community support, and outreach. And in addition, we also made 4 other groups by research tours, since these tours are cross-cutting and can bridge different research areas. And those are modeling, measurements, remote sensing, and application development in Africa. And please check my previous emails if you want to be added to any of these groups. We are also planning a workshop later this year or early next year. And these groups will be used for group discussions in the workshop and also for writing a concept paper afterwards. We are also organizing seminar series. In fact, today is our very first seminar of the UCAR Africa Initiative Seminar Series. And I'd like to thank you all for being part of this if you are involved in this effort. And if you are not currently signed up but are interested in learning more, please contact me. And if you are only interested in these seminars, we appreciate that too. Our first seminar will be given by Dr. Jiang. Jiang is a climate scientist specializing in atmospheric science, climate dynamics, hydrology, and remote sensing. Currently, she is a postdoc scholar working in the environment and policy groups at UC San Diego. She received her PhD in atmospheric science from University at Albany State University of New York in 2022 and her bachelor in atmospheric science from Zhongshan University in China in 2016. Yang's research primarily centers on the water cycle and land-human climate interactions. Her work uses physical hydrology, Earth observation, climate modeling, and machine learning to analyze and understand hydroclimatic disturbances in critical ecosystems and empower effective hydrological hazard mitigation strategies. Yang's current work focuses on harnessing satellite-derived water isotopes and crop mapping techniques to ensure water sources for food production and facilitate water management in the face of increasing dryness. And Yang, take it away.
Okay, thanks very much for Wenfu's great introduction. And good morning, everyone. My name is Jiang, and right now I'm a postdoc at the School of Global Policy and Strategy at UC San Diego. And thanks so much for having me here today. And it's my great honor to become the first speaker of UCAR's Africa Initiative seminar series over here. And as it's titled here, today I'm going to share with you about my previous work on changes in rainfall patterns and wildfires under an observed long-term drying trend over Central Africa. Though Wenfu has already give a very wonderful introduction about myself, I'm gonna do one more time quickly through about us very brief introduction about myself. So I earned my bachelor degree in atmospheric science from Sun Yat-sen University in China, and then worked with Dr. Liming Zhou on rainfall changes in the Congo Basin. I obtained my PhD in atmospheric science just last March. And right now, as a postdoc scholar, so I'm working with Dr. Jennifer Burning on measuring the atmospheric moisture resources to ensure water availability for crop production over here. Okay, then let's get started. So before we enter the science stories, I want to bring in more background information about Central Africa, simply referred as CA here. As you can see in this map, so Central Africa is actually epicenters of convection and storms. So high annual rainfall here, and also the very intense rainfall gradient along latitude, so bring like very various biomass in this region. So Central Africa contains and holds the world's second largest rainforest, the Congo rainforest, at its central region. So including surrounding savannas and grassland, so it holds up to 50% of species on land. And its rich biomass provide plenty resources, including water, goods, and medicines for hundreds and millions of people over here. And it's also like supports the largest hydroelectric power plant, serving majority of the African countries over here. What's more, the Congo rainforest is also the largest rainforest carbon sink on Earth. So alongside with its humid climate, another very astonishing fact regarding Central Africa is that it's also a hotspot of wildfires. So here I attached a fire map from NASA just showing active burning happening just for yesterday. So we can easily say that fires are happening in Canada and States right now. And what's like we can never miss these like eye-catchy bright spots is the hotspot of like wildfires in Central Africa. So the whole continent actually contributes up to 70% of global burned area and up to half of like the total fire emissions. So regarding recent rapid climate change and also ongoing development in this region, so actually Central Africa is more vulnerable than we used to think. And in the following slides, I'd want to address a few emergency climate crises here. So in this figure shows the histogram of annual mean rainfall for the three famous tropical rainforests. So like this right line represents rainfall histogram for Africa. So compared to the Amazon and also the southern Eastern Asian rainforest, the Congo rainforest is much drier over here. Thus, the traditional convention used to think that this drier Congo rainforest should be more sustainable or less sensitive to hydroclimatic disturbances. However, widespread drying and browning trends have been observed by limited observations and newly available datasets over this region. What's more, this aridity is projected to continue in the near future. So in this way, this long-term drying to put the local ecosystems and communities under some like dangers over here. And regarding like these drying and warming climates, we also like suppose that it would like escalate burning risks over this region. So as this map showing, the Congo rainforest, actually it is more fragmented than the Amazon rainforest. And in this local region, deforestation is increasing like in recent years. So regarding like these facts, so fires might like trap us like this humid rainforest barrier and burn drier trees in this region. And this potential extension of wildfires might also like increase like emissions from fires, which can threaten the carbon emission goals and also like the air quality to threaten public health. In this way, we can say that like the local economic and societal developments in Central Africa is actually very sensitive to harsh climatic disturbances. And considering a recent like study showing that the local fattest population growth rate happening over here, and also like the changing like climate, it would like make it more difficult like to meet the soaring livelihood needs like for local communities over here. So considering like all these facts, so it put like Central Africa at forefront of climate challenges, and it does become a key region if we want to reach sustainable development goals as this African initiative wants to address. So in the following slides, I'm gonna show like my two works to addressing this emergency climate crisis and how my colleagues and I are trying to combining Earth observations and advanced analytic tools to conduct relative like researches over Central Africa. So first, following up like the long-term drying trends happening in Central Africa, we first assessed changes in dry season lengths in the Congo Basin. And our results also like press release featured by NASA Earth Observatory confirmed that the dry season has become longer in the Congo rainforest, and the results have already like been published, and welcome to check our paper over here. So we might wonder like why we care about dry season, especially dry season length. As we usually think that the tropical rainforests, they should be humid like all the time. But a very interesting fact is that the rainforest also experience shifts between wet and dry seasons. And as this like figure showing the decomposition of annual rainfall cycles, so when and how much, how long does it rain would directly shape the rainfall patterns in this local region. And especially like for the dry seasons, during which the monthly rainfall would below annual mean, are pretty like essential like to determine the vegetation composition and also distribution by affecting variable soil water supply. It can also impact fire weathers, since like fire mainly occurs during dry seasons over here. And if the dry season becomes longer, so it would put like local biomass or plants under extra water stress. So in this way, by quantifying like potential changes in dry season and dry season length might provide like us with like more useful insights regarding why and how like the decreased rainfall amount happening in Central Africa. So in the Congo Basin, as it locates at the equatorial like region in Central Africa, one fact is that like it has a very unique bimodal annual rainfall cycle, as shown in this figure. So it experiences two rainy seasons during the boreal spring and autumn, and two dry seasons during the boreal summer and winter seasons. And as we previously mentioned about like this long-term drying trends, it's especially strong and significantly during the boreal spring rainfall season, which like happening during March to May. So this kind of like strong drying trend does make us skeptical about like potential changes in the dry season and dry season lengths in the following boreal summer months over here. So like my works kind of like to combining like two methods to address this like emergency crisis and these critical questions. So as I mentioned, the seasonal rainfall cycle is quite complicated during the Congo Basin. So here we applied a curve-based method to identify the start and the end of the dry season. So we're trying to identify like the timing of the dry season by calculating the inflection points of cumulative anomalies of hydroclimatic variables. So this figure is an example showing the calculations using rainfall datasets. And in our rest study, we mainly gonna focus on this like dry season covering June to August over here. And another challenge I did not mention is that like over the Central African right now, they are got like very limited observation available over here. So we're trying to combine using observational and real analysis rainfall data sets, and also satellite the retrieved products measuring plants' greenness, water contents, and also photosynthesis to trying like to quantify the changes in dry season lengths. So in this way, the analysis results gonna provide like details regarding variations in the timing, length, and also the intensity of the dry season from both hydrologic and ecologic perspectives. So first, I'd like to show the results observed by rainfall datasets. So as the figure shows here, it's the spatial patterns of the long-term trends in dry season length measured by rainfall dataset. So these red grids means that the dry seasons have become longer. Although like produced with different data resources and different interpolation methods. So all four precipitation datasets indicates that the boreal summer dry season length has become longer over the intact Congo basin, especially over the central and southern basin here. And at the right, I'd show the regional mean results. It tells us that the longer dry season length is mainly like aligned or attributed to an early start of the dry season. And next, we conducted the same analysis using these plant indices over here, though they might provide us with different the start and end dates of the dry season. But this like two, NDVI measuring plants' greenness and VOD measuring the water content in the plants, they both like showing like very similar and consistent like necessarily of the dry season length over the Congo basin as well. And however, here next, they are like showing like some like interesting results like from plant indices. So the regional mean results indicates by the plant indices that the longer dry season length is meaning like aligned with a delayed end of the dry season instead of an earlier start as indicated by previous rainfall data sets. So next we wonder like why like this discrepancy would exist between rainfall and plant indices products. Thus, we checked about the interaction among the rainfall, soil moisture, and vegetation. So especially like we cannot ignore that there exist very strong lag correlations among rainfall, soil moisture, and plants. So as like we see here, we observed and confirmed that the rainfall has already like decreased in the precedent rainy season and also the early dry season. And then like these disturbances like in rainfall in precedent months kind of like to pass these signals into soil moisture. Thus we're also like seeing decrease like in soil moisture. And later, like these cumulative water deficits kind of like to pass through these water stress into plants and vegetation. Thus, like we can like observe consistent decrease like in the greenness and also like the plants become drier. So in this way, like we're seeing like early disturbances in precipitation would kind of like to pass like these signals all the way like finally to the plants over here. And in this way, like for the plants, they need like more raining water or other water resources to replenish this water deficit and for them like to recover from like dry conditions to regrowth again. as like we confirmed also like about the drier and longer dry season trends, we then kind of like to spontaneously thinking about our previous concerns in wildfires. So we kind of like in our like second work, we checked and quantifying like the changes in wildfires. However, very counterintuitively, we found that under the drying and longer dry season lengths, like changes, we find the total burned area wildfires have declined like in Central Africa. And in next slides, I'm gonna like unveil like more details, like why we're seeing like a surprise like changes in wildfires here. So to better align our concerns with like the drying trend and also like the lengthening in dry season lengths, we break down our general concerns in the total like burned areas and wildfires into three more detailed questions. So first, we combined like these two new and advanced burned area dataset, which is a very useful and efficient variable to measure the wildfire activities, and also compute vision methods to quantifying the changes in total burned area and also the frequency and intensity of different fire categories. And next, I want to mention another like very tricky facts we need to be careful when conducting studies regarding wildfires in Central Africa. Because as I mentioned here, we got a very various biomes over here, like including rainforests, savannas, or grasslands. So these different ecosystems, they involve very different interactions among fire weather and other physical factors might like conduct different like responses like under external or climatic disturbances over here. So like considering about these facts, I'm gonna like explain more details later. So we kind of like also wondering like if we're seeing variations in wildfires, so how these changes gonna like depended on different land cover types. And last, we also like wonder like what kind of like factors would drive or like impacts these wildfire activities and their variations. Thus, we kind of like to apply to advanced machine learning method called random forest regression to help us to attribute the major contributors to driving the wildfire changes. So first, I'd like to quickly showing like how like these two burned area data like measure the wildfire activities over Central Africa. So as the left map shows here, so both of like the burned area dataset from NASA and Oak Ridge Lab archives got very similar measurements of wildfire activities. And here the unit is percentage, meaning like the how many like areas is burning like within one like single grid or one single pixel over here. And at the left, showing the annual like fire cycles like over the north and south of the equator. So as we like notice that like for regions like in the north and south Central Africa, they experiencing actually like very different like annual seasonal fire cycles. So in our rest studies, we're gonna like to quantify the variations in wildfires like in north and south of the equators over Central Africa separately. And here, showing the spatial patterns of how burned area has changed, like for the past around 15 years. Here, like is the result from Modi's burned area data, and another data set just showing very similar results over here. And we can see like these blue grids, meaning that the burned area has already decreased. And I'd like you to notice that this decrease trend is especially strong over the north of the equator in Central Africa. And next, we wonder like how the general decrease in total burn area is related like to changes in the frequency and also the size or intensity of a single fire. So as I mentioned before, we use this computer vision method called connected component labeling. So it's like using the information from burnt area, it can tell us the time, duration, and also the location of a single fire. So as like we catches like all these like fire events, we kind of like to categorize them like into 6 different fire sizes over here, ranging from small fires to large and mega fires. And also a quick reference, if you don't know, like for a small fire, like around 100 hectares, it would be similar to the size of 140 standard soccer fields over here. And in this way, the total burned area can be simply calculated or expressed as fire size times the fire frequency over here. Then, like, we can check like how different fire frequency and size has already changed. So here, first, I'd show the changes in fire frequency. And here we can find that total fire frequency has already decreased significantly, and especially like in the north of the equator as well. And like all large fires showing very like significant like decrease in trends. And for the size or intensity like of different fire categories, we find that the overall like changes like in fire size is less significant or less stronger as the fire frequency, but we do like seeing there's a very significant decrease in the intensity of megafires, and also like in north of the equator of Central Africa. And next, we wonder like how like these changes in happening, well do they like changes? As I mentioned, like in Central Africa, there are like various different like ecosystems. So combining the land cover type data from NASA, so we include 6 major land cover types in Central Africa. And I'd like you to notice that, like in our study here, we exclude croplands because, like, the fire measurements are pretty like poor in these regions. So as the histogram showing here, it shows like the location or like the places fire like many happening in north and south of the equator, and we can like easily tell that majority up to 80% of like fires happening over savannas and the grassland, as shown in this yellow and orange color, and like over forested region, as we seeing like very strong drying trends. So there are only about 10% of like burnings happening in this region. So how has like wildfire changes like over like these different land cover types? As we addressed like earlier, like we got immediate spontaneous like concerning regarding increased fire risks. We did like observe that total burned area has already like increased, especially over the southern edge of the Congo rainforest. Well, like also like very consistent with the total burn area over savannas and grassland, we observed that the total burn area has decreased very significantly. And the declined burnt area over these ecosystems in savannas and grassland also like contributed to the majority of the total like decreased burnt area trends. Then we wonder like what kind of like, or which like factors would be the main contributor like driving wildfire changes over rainforest and savannas and grassland. So here I mentioned like we adopted like this advanced random forest model like in our study. So in previous study, like people might usually like use linear models or multiple linear models like to kind of like to check the association among burnt area and different physical variables. However, like as here, like we mentioned, like different interactions between file and land cover types, and also like for the impacts from different basic factors, they can become like very like complicated and nonlinear. Thus, like we adopt like this method. So in our model, we used 9 different variables as the drivers, including like some like common weather variables, think like very important weather, and also like variables like measuring human activities. I remember should be the crop extent. Like in this model, in this way, like we can also like tell the relative importance of natural and anthropogenic contributions. And for the Y, or the targeted predict terms. So we simply kind of like to using percentile methods to set like or like grades with significant like burned area changes into 2 categories. The ones like with low burned area and the ones like with experiencing high burned area. In this way, like they also like align very well like with small fires and big fires happening over here. So first, I'd like to showing how like the model results like showing like over the rainforest as we seeing like increase of like burned area in the southern Congo age over here. So we found that like precipitation, wind, and temperature are the 3 most important contributors driving like wildfires and also wildfire like changes over here. And here, these like curves showing the composite like comparison among like the differences in these 3 variables during like the recent 6 years compared with like the past 6 years. And we can see like that, especially like I'd like you to following on these blue lines. They kind of like to aligned with the increased wildfires in recent years. We can see like that decreased precipitation and relatively weaker wind speeds, and also how temperature kind of like to cast like there would be more like increased burned area in the rainforest age. And then we're gonna like enter the more like interesting results like over savannas and grasslands, because we're seeing an unsurprisingly decreased trend in wildfires in these ecosystems. Here I show the results over savannas and grasslands in the North Hemisphere. It got very similar results in the South Hemisphere as well. And we found that like the NDVI referring to vegetation greenness and productivity, dry season length, and precipitation amount are the 3 most important like contributors for the wildfire changes. And as I mentioned that like for the model prediction targets, so we do like saying like how these 3 variables gonna correspond or cast enhanced like or expressed fire activities. So as like these red lines referring to high burned area cases, it shows that like higher NDVI or higher vegetation productivity and more precipitation and also like shorter dry season length actually would like favor like more burning like in these regions. And similarly, like here showing like the differences between the recent and past 6 years. So as we're seeing like recent years with decreased burned area, we can like saying here that decreased greenness productivity and longer dry season lengths, and also like decreased precipitation kind of like to lead to the decreased burned area. So how to understanding these kind of like counterintuitive results? So we can considering about like the interactions among foul weather and savannas and grasslands. Actually, like we found that like in these ecosystems, biomass fuels would be the major like contributors or constraints for local wildfire weathers. So in this way, like when we got like longer dry season and less or and decrease the rainfall, actually it would cause there are less available plants to burn, means there are decreased biomass for biomass fuels. So in this way, like we got less things to burn. Thus, we got like decreased burn area in this region. And last, we finally come like to some like quick conclusions about like my sharing work today. So we found that the dry season lengths become longer, and also the dry season becomes drier like over Central Equator Africa, especially the Congo Basin. And regarding like our concerns in changes in wildfires, we used to think fires would become like more and more like in this region, but the datasets showing that like burned area actually like decreased in Central Africa, especially like for the frequency of big fires in north of equator over here. And more interesting is that like using the rainforest model, we found that hydrologic factors and biomass fuel availability, actually they are the leading factors constraints the wildfire changes instead of like human activities like land use change or agricultural expansion. And we found like very different like ways for how like the changes in rainfall patterns and dry season lengths would impact the plant conditions, and finally like resulted in different like changes in fires over rainforest and arid savanna and grassland. And as we're moving on for the future, like using my study as a lens, I was saying like there are a lot of like future promising endeavors can be addressed, especially like with like the scientists and also like advanced techniques in UCAR and UNCAR, and also like from everyone like sitting here over here. So first, as we mentioned, like changes like in the hydroclimatic variables in Central Africa. So to better understanding what causes the changes, so we have like already noticed like there are very complicated interplay among oceanic like variability and also land surface characteristics. So to like better attributed relative contributes like from different Earth components. So we cannot like done this without like support and application using cross-scale like advanced climate models. And the second part like is what also like my postdoc project focusing on is regarding as we seeing like the hydroclimatic disturbances, we do have an emergency and a very like important needs to better like to enlighten future land use change policy and ways, and also like to manage the water resources like more efficiently. And I'm thinking like that these kind of like ambitions can like be like largely like reached with like the broad like network and also like efforts like from institutions like UCAR, UNCAR here. And third one is like regarding like the foul emissions and air quality issues, which like I even did not get a chance like to explore a lot yet. But like during like our studies regarding wildfires, we found like this part definitely gonna be like addressing some like very promising and important questions, as we do not have the chance to check like how changes in wildfires gonna like send back feedback to impact the weather and the climate locally or even like globally, and also like how like the air quality like impacted by fires gonna like impact like local people's health or like got like further like impacts. So very welcome like everyone to reach me online or also like in person. And last, I want to thank UNCAR, UCAR, and also WinFu's invitations again very much. With that, I will stop here, and thanks very much for your listening.
Very interesting talk. Very interesting talk. Thank you, Yan. If you are online and you have a question, you can use the Slido, which is right below the webcast box. And do we have any questions in the room?
Yeah, very interesting talk. Is the deforestation man-made or natural, and also is there a feedback between the deforestation and climate change?
Yes, thanks, Jimmy, very much. So the question is regarding like whether there's any interactions among deforestation and local like weather or climate. So I forgot to mention that like actually like in Central Africa, the deforestation scale is very little compared like to Amazon and the Southern East Asian, I think like meaning like happening over Western Africa. So right now, like through our studies, we found that like the deforestation actually like play very limited like impacts like over like the hydroclimate like over Central Africa over here. But like there's like one opening like points is that because right now as we're using rainfall observations and satellite the satellite observations, so their resolution is very limited. I think like only up to 500 meters. But as you mentioned that like logging is a very like big issues in Central Africa. But like to catch like these logging impacts, especially like they happened a lot in the northern and the southern edges of the rainforest, I think we need like higher like and better like observations and monitoring of these activities. And I think like with like these kind of like improvements, we can like better like to quantifying like their impacts like on local ecosystems and climate here.
And the other part was the savanna, you showed large changes with time, and could also some of that be like a feedback of a warmer climate? Would this trend continue in a warming climate? What's your guess for that?
Yeah, thanks very much for this question. So Jimmy like wonder as we're seeing like the decreased trends in savanna. So whether these trends gonna continuing like in the near future. So for me, I was thinking that like it would become because like as there's like a very significant trend happening right now is about like how total wildfire activities has shifted from savanna grassland to forest regions, especially like over high latitudes, and especially like for arid regions like over close to equator and subtropical. So we see like the rainfall like very like highly possible like the drying trend's gonna like still continue. So in this way, we're saying like fires gonna like continue like over here.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since you're on this slide, what do you think of the role of small fires, and would that play a role in the trends?
Oh, that's a very good question. So since like we notice like majority of fires are big fires, so I'm thinking like for small fires, it would be like a very efficient way for them like to happening like over the boundary of rainforest, especially like over these regions, like they used to be very humid, but right now they become drier. So sometimes like the small fires would be like easier like to happening over here since like they want like to expand that like quickly and that large over there. And you also like address like an ongoing like concerning like regarding measuring of small fires. So even like as we use like the latest advanced burn area datasets, the product like themselves like still suffered like to fully like to cover the small fires. So we like in this way like I think like we still like based a lot of information regarding small fires, and usually like they are very like closely related to land cover changes as Jimmy addressed, like if there are deforestation happening, so they're gonna like involve a lot with small fires.
And I have another question. You mentioned reduction in biomass, explaining the reduction in fires, burnt area, and emissions. Mm-hmm. Do you have evidence for that? And have you looked at satellite data of above ground biomass?
You mentioned that we.
Or is just a result of statistical model?
Oh, I think like, yes. I think like the decreased biomass like fuel for fires. I think like we also like got like very consistent changes as we measured when we like measure like the changes in dry season lengths. I think I got a map. Oh, yeah, this one. Yeah, because I like in our results, like I only like showing like the drying trend like over Central African, but actually like for the rest of the map, so you can see like beyond like the rainforest regions. So this drying trend like also like happening like over surrounding regions like while like savanna and grassland exist. So in this way, like we would suggest like they are also like decreasing like in plants greenness over these regions.
But you haven't looked at satellite estimate of biomass.
Oh, but for satellite map, we did not yet. Yeah. So it would be like great idea like to check like the exact trends over these regions.
It's really hard to know.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Let's do the online question first, because Ronnie put his question. Can you pin the question? Yeah. Or I'll just read it. So Ronnie has a question regarding the diverging trend between aridity and burned area. I'm curious about the role of humans in decoupling climate and fire. Are these methods able to consider human impacts that may favor decreasing fire trends, for example, urbanization, suppression, deforestation, prescribed burning?
Thanks, Ronnie, very much for these questions. So a quick answer is that right now, like not yet, but as I mentioned that like here is the more details about the method we used to addressing like impacts in fact fires. So regarding the role of humans like in like the decoupling climate and fire, so right now we are only able like to include crop extent as like a very simple like representative like of human activities. As I also like addressed, there are a lot of like logging and also infrastructure construction happening right now. So we are not like able like to using like continuous and also like good quality data sets and high resolution data sets like to using them like in our models. So, but like with like improvements like in these measurements, so with like looking forward, like we got like these better measurements and to better address like human impacts like in our future studies.
Thanks.
Very nice analysis. I have two quick questions. One is, have you looked at the changes or trend of the savanna and grassland areas? Like, for example, you are looking at the total burned area, but then what if the total area of savanna and grassland is also decreasing? Like, say, after the fires, then the ecosystem is never gonna recovered from the fires. Then you won't have this. So, like, yeah, that's my first question. The second question is when you do the random forest analysis, did you do this pixel-wise when you train the model, or you aggregate all the pixels for high bound versus low bound and together, and then do the time series just for each of these aggregated area?
Thanks on Celine's question. So the first one like is regarding like whether like the total area of savannas and grassland has been impacted either by the weather or like the land use changes. So quick like answer, I'd prefer to say no, because like as for land use changes, I mentioned that like at least based on like the right now version of Modi's data stats, so we're seeing like land cover changes are very like rare like in this region, and worrying that like whether like fires would impact like the distribution of savannas and grasslands. Actually, like fires like plays a very like unique like role in these regions. So in like normal conditions, so fire like is a very like norm like what are happening here. So you got savanna and grassland, like you grow up, then like the fires burnt, and they can like grow back very quickly after fire weather. So in this way, I think like fire, kind of like we help to sustain like the savanna and grassland ecosystems over this region. And for the second question is about the application of the random forest model. So in this way, so we kind of like to integrate like all grids together. So that means like when we checking like the results like over savannas and grassland in north of the equator, so we put like all like grids over like these land cover types like together like to do the analysis. No, like by each different grid, because like you got like different grid pixels, and then like you got like a lot of like samples, and you with that like grid like you got fire information and weather information and the crop extent information like that. Oh, so here like the remote sensing data like is up to 500 meters, but we kind of like to align them all on 0.25 degree.
Okay. Yeah, we have question and comments online. So Helen asked, do you use Chopper-Me-Sieve observations to look at plant types and changes at kilometer scale spatial resolution?
Oh, I can, thanks for the question. So here I can pull out like more detailed information regarding each dataset we used. And regarding for SIF, I think like the resolution actually like, we got the products like from like our collaborators from NASA. So they've already like to interpolated like everything like onto a coarse resolution about 2.5 degree, and it's not like from Chopper-Me. If I remember correctly, it's from like OCO. Like it's originally like aimed to measure the ozone like variables, and they like try to using that data sets to got a relatively like longer like records of SIF.
Great, thanks. And Solomon says, thank you, nice talk, he has to leave. Yeah. And if we have no more questions, yeah. He has to leave. Yeah, you have a question.
Yeah, this is just like a clarification. I'm curious, like for the burning areas, it seems there's a different seasonality north of the equator and the south of the equator, and I'm curious why is that? I don't know much about Africa, so I'm just curious.
Oh, thanks for Ifan's question. Yeah, I'm sorry, like I forgot like to mention some like basic like climate conditions over here. So like the fall season actually like is aligned like with the rainfall season. So like over Central African, so I previously mentioned about the biannual models like of the rainfall happening here, so which is mainly driven by the northward and southward of the motion of the ITZZ. So that's why, like, for example, like for the north of the equator, so like the rain belt like would like started like to move like from north to the south, like since like the end of the rainy season, like during the spring. So that's why like as the rain belt moved to southward, it becomes like dry like during the June, July, August in this region. So we, sorry, I got like I got like the opposite like explanation. So actually like during like this season, like the rain belt actually like moves northwards during the summer over here. So that's why like we got more rainfall here, so less fires. And as like the rainfall like moves like to the south in winter season, that means like during the January February, like to the south equator of Central African, so you got like more rainfall like during like this month. So like you got like less fire like in south of the equator, but like more like over like this like June, July, August months here.
Great. I think we have no more questions, and let's thank our speaker Yang again.